All right, welcome back everybody from that break. Just a few more talks to go before we go into our happy hour, and we'll jump right in. For this next interview, I want to bring on Sandy from Scroll. We're going to talk about a lot of cool things about the evolution of Scroll, some stuff that helps us understand how we should think about other L2s, and a bunch of stuff in between. So please give Sandy a big round of applause. I think we're just 12 months into the mainnet launch, maybe a couple weeks away.
Yeah, that's right. So
it's been a year. Congratulations.
Almost a year. We launched on the 10th of October.
There we go, so 3 weeks.
Yep.
How has the launch been since? And if you were to reflect on the last 11 and a half months, what would you say kind of went really well and what did not?
I think there are definitely a few things that went really well and a few things that could have done better. The things that went really well when you're looking back is always that nothing went wrong and everything still works. And so we've been running the chain for a year, and there's definitely a ton of learnings. And the minute your product ships, the level and the quality of feedback just becomes an order of magnitude better, because like before that, you're just relying on guesstimates and assumptions. And we've definitely fine-tuned our development roadmap and fine-tuned the way we organize ourselves quite significantly over the last year to optimize for growth and to optimize for a lot of the overwhelming feedback we got from the community. So that's the good part. The bad part is I think as an org is like running and people are constantly using your chain, our response time and our reaction loop hasn't been as tight as we would have liked. So you identify issues, but the time of which you fix it is never good enough because people on chain demand like real-time response. And so if there are like ticket skipping or any kind of like minor issues, we hear a lot about it. And so there's just been a lot of like bits and pieces that just keeps us busy.
But is that you commenting on the fact that if you get a complaint or if you know you have to make some improvement, it just takes more time to fix it because you have to wait for a proper protocol upgrade or something else?
Protocol upgrade, that's one thing. And the other thing is just how seeing people behave on chain. I think we could have anticipated some of those things. We're just maybe not as sensitive. So, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. If you were to launch mainnet now, or looking back at all your learnings from the last year, would you do anything differently, or rather advice for other protocols who are trying to launch mainnet?
Yeah, so I think we focused a lot on the things that we thought were essential. So when we think about building an ecosystem, we kind of thought about it from first principle and about, okay, what are the things that are essential in Ethereum and in the wider blockchain space, and we started from there. So we're very blue chip oriented as an L2. So we have Base, we have Aave, and we have like Uniswap, so on and so forth, like Compound, Lido, like all very early on in our development. And that is good for testing the compatibility aspect of our design because it's a net new chain. But we probably should have been a little bit more ambitious in terms of focusing on applications that leverages our unique selling point, which is kind of super fast finality. And but fundamentally, for a single chain application developer, this doesn't actually matter that much. We had a thesis that people who are super degen on chain, who are making allocation across different L2s, would really appreciate this feature. And we try to talk to a lot of these kind of on-chain, like super active and price-sensitive users. But for them, the feedback is that they've gotten used to a way of managing their portfolio where they don't actually move from chain to chain, because just they're quite set in the way of, like, where chain movement is a little bit painful or creates a little bit of friction. But I think the time for that behavior to change will be when finality gets to the sub-second category. and then call data between chains and assets and NFTs moving between chains will become near instant. And at that point, I think there's going to be a kind of a seismic kind of behavior change where with one wallet, one interface, you can maneuver all of your assets across the L2s. And then the next problem after that is then like how do you use one wallet interface and maneuver assets across like Solana and other L1s and Cosmos, etc. So I think baby steps, but I think we're very close to getting like sub-minute proving time. We're currently at like 8 minutes. But in 3 to 6 months' time, we're going to get to like we're going to get to like 10 seconds.
That's awesome. That's a massive improvement.
Yeah. So fundamentally, for people on the main chain, this doesn't make any difference whatsoever, unfortunately. Right. So we look and feel exactly the same as every other chain. But I think once and the costs have come down significantly, and I think that's going to be the kind of the critical moment where the entire like EVM ecosystem is going to come together.
And maybe just so I personally understand this better, the proving time is not the same as finality here, right? This is just the settlement on layer 1, yeah. But they are still noticing, 2 seconds for confirmation, and that's finality, or is finality still the settlement? Like, what's the finality time now versus?
The finality time right now is about like 10 minutes.
I see, so which is the actual 8 minutes plus?
Yeah.
Okay, understood. And that becomes, when it becomes sub-second, then it's actually beneficial because you have way better guarantees about the money.
Correct, yeah.
Amazing. So that seems like when you kind of thought about this as part of the launch, you said, well, it may not actually be as relevant to people, but then you kind of noticed that only post-launch from feedback. You also kind of started doing a lot of programs to kind of grow the ecosystem usage, and there was a loyalty program that you introduced. Scroll sessions, and how kind of did you come up with that setup? What was that incentive program, and what has been sort of the outcomes there?
I think we started the incentive system to try and be kind of like a GPS to direct capital to where it's needed to get the ecosystem jumpstart. Previously, we've been running the chain for about 6 months, and we had about 200 mil TVL-ish on chain, and that's completely like unsteered, super organic, and everyone just like does what they want in the theme park. But one consistent feedback we got from players was that I got a lot of pings saying like, oh, where should I go? Where do you want me to park capital? And I didn't want to be a kind of a manual traffic controller. And so instead of telling people, please be an LP here, please put lending here, and assessing their risk profile and explaining how much this is needed versus another, we thought of trying out an automated way to do this, and it's been a very important learning process. So when we started, Blast kind of achieved tremendous success in terms of capturing capital and attention with their points program, and I think there are definitely a lot of learnings there where the gold and the regular points kind of left a lot of teams feeling kind of underappreciated, so on and so forth, and at the point of which those points ended, it was basically the end of a project, because it meant that there was no way capital would go somewhere that is not directed from the centralized front end, and I think we somewhat basically we try to be as credibly neutral as possible. So by first incentivizing the asset end, so and then the asset can still go wherever they want, and then we started trying to direct assets to certain pools that were that were so-called more beneficial for the ecosystem, but mainly from a capital velocity perspective. So LP, for example, ETH pairs and important asset pairs on a DEX is much more valuable to an ecosystem, and it generates much more kind of usefulness, quote unquote, than anywhere else. But I think the high-level learning from running the program so far is that people respond to incentives a lot.
But do they stay around after the incentives are done?
So I think we don't know that. And I think we plan on continuously applying incentives until we're and I think that there needs to be a path for incentives to slowly ramp down. So like all like Web2 or like internet companies uses incentives to onboard new users until a point where a certain type of user behavior is pretty set. And so we will continue running incentives, but we will be trying out different things based on the learnings that we've done so far. Another learning we've had is that people are not as like economic driven, like purely as we had hoped. We wanted to direct a lot more capital to DEX pools. And so we kept increasing the incentive like multiplier. But the market is just not super sensitive to that. People can see that your marks, which is our version of points, goes up quite quickly, like exponentially, and then but that doesn't move the needle, unfortunately. And then another interesting point is that people have like existing habits. So like there are lending users who are just here for the lending, and they wouldn't even consider anything else. And there are like blue chip type of users who have very stringent kind of risk tolerance requirements, and regardless of what the incentive is, they don't care. They just have one type of behavior on chain. And for those type of users, how you apply incentive actually matters less, and we've been kind of sneakily trying like fine tune it if someone is like not super sensitive, and we're getting more and more experimental and getting more and more focused. So 2 weeks ago we launched a program with ETHery Cash, which is a on-chain credit card that allows a on-chain degen user park their capital on Aave, park ETHery ETH on Aave, or also normal ETH and wrap ETH and so on and so forth, and borrow stablecoin against it, and then swipe at any like Visa accepted outlets, so that you can live your full financial life on-chain in a very, very degen way. And we've designed the behavior in a way where we're hoping that this can set forth a behavior change. So from previous studies, the assumption is that if you used a new card for 3 months continuously, then this card is very likely to stick with you as your primary card for a lifetime.
That's even in Web2, that's the incentive that they give you for the points bonuses.
Correct. So the first 3 months is going to be highly incentivized for every net new user, and they're going to receive like a bunch of different kind of points and incentives, and I think that is something that you would pay for in terms of user acquisition for the DeFi core, anyways.
That makes a lot of sense. Is there any other group that's targeted beyond DeFi users, or kind of how do you think about other categories of?
Yeah. So for any category that is outside of the DeFi core, I think the incentive mechanism is a lot more untested, and it needs a bit more like an experimental approach. So we're running an experiment with a project called Huma. It's kind of like RWA off-chain yield of like 10 to 15%, depending on the time you lock up, and the money goes towards this kind of supply chain finance, like very TradFi type of yield source, and with also a variable on-chain component to it. So an aggregate is a very like attractive yield source overall, but like people, the current on-chain user set who are super degen did not react super well to this kind of setup, even though the total like numerical yield
economic value of
exactly. Yeah. So but this has been incredibly popular when we go to like family offices or people who are net new to the space, who doesn't understand where like DEX yield comes from, who doesn't understand like the Aave looping strategy, like. So it's just like it's with new products, you need to like find new audiences, and we're learning a lot of these lessons on the ground. And then the last project I want to give a shout out to that is going to be launching on Scroll very soon is also a semi RWA project. The mechanism and the smart contracts are on chain, so it's trackable, and it essentially leverages the the on-chain pool of capital, but the yield source comes from the price difference between the different USDT and local currency markets on P2P exchanges in Africa. And so the base yield will get to about like 8 to 10%, which is very solid. And then there's like variable yield based on like whatever the token launch might be in the future.
That sounds really awesome and useful. Like this is super practical.
Correct, yeah. So they struggle to raise funding, otherwise. And if this can speak to the on-chain degen community who are, all moving around, like
it's like a perfect example of diversification if you're betting entirely on on-chain yield.
Correct.
Which I still don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, so we're learning, and we're iterating, but it's a process, and obviously we wish it could be faster, but we're doing this with the community.
Are there any other themes that you've noticed on what's kind of popular at Scroll? Like, are we seeing more gaming? Are we seeing very specific zk applications? Are people using the zkEVMs uniquely? Like, what else is trending?
I think there are, like, in terms of technical tools, there's a lot of zk innovation. We have a zkWASM kind of L3 that has launched on Scroll, and it basically offers an EVM environment and like faster and cheaper than Solana. And we've had a L3 order book DEX that is very kind of price competitive compared to something like close to like kind of an L1 like Hyperliquid, for example. And so there's a lot of these like really cool product with innovative tech and applied zk, but that to get commercial success and get like visibility and build a community, all of these things takes a really long time. So I think the type of builders on Scroll are generally like super strong like tech builders, and they're leveraging the design space that's opened up by the zkEVM, and also all the zk tools are available. And what is somewhat missing is kind of that business acumen of trying to find a niche and trying to find a user, and there's like maybe a little bit of a gap there for some of these. It's just really hard to be really into deep tech and also into design and front end and user acquisition. It's a well-rounder sport, and we're trying to think of ways to get more people from different backgrounds to be attracted to Scroll. I think people come to Scroll because they resonate with what we're doing, the fact that we're building cool things, and we're building something that's original. But these type of people who understands our value proposition are not necessarily like the best artists or the best like meme lord. And so I think the next stage of growth for us, that we need to kind of build a stronger brand, a more distinguishable brand, and appeal to a wider set of builders. So that is the next step of growth. But maybe the lesson there is that we should have thought about this earlier.
It's that list keeps on getting bigger if you go down that route of retrospectives.
That's what happens when you're trying to assemble a plane.
Yes. What have been some things that have either been changes that have happened in protocol upgrades since the mainnet, or things that have kind of come up as, hey, this would definitely make things better for the future development? Like, are there any kind of things on the layer 2 itself that you are improving or have kind of been introduced?
Yeah, we've been developing a number of things since mainnet. So first of all, we've designed KeyStore to unify smart contract accounts across chains. And we have L1 SLO to read from L1 quickly, allowing like better interop. And the fees on Scroll has reduced 3 to 10x with proof aggregation, and we're launching a bunch of other features to kind of serve a multi-chain future and better UX in general. So since mainnet, we've done 4 upgrades, and the lore, which we've kind of like hidden in there, is that each of the upgrade is named after like a well-known mathematician from the past, and with like the acronym starting from like ABCD.
So we got 22 more upgrades to go.
Yep.
And then we're done, right? The blockchain's complete.
We'll think of something maybe different.
How do you think about a lot of these new zkVMs coming up. We've kind of seen a pretty big evolution of people taking the RISC-V VMs and introducing the optimistic rollups or just more application-specific ones. Do you kind of think those are interesting or applicable? Do you feel like the more those things kind of come up, they end up sort of not making, or it kind of dilutes the case of having a distinction between a zkVM or zk rollup versus optimistic rollup? Like, what's kind of your lens on this?
I think depending on the time frame of which to answer this question, in the long run, every chain will be a zk chain. We're pretty certain of that future. In the short run, I think there is a difference. So in the short run, I would say the time to build a general purpose and a holistic chain team, that time has come and passed. I think there will always be niche and incremental improvements. So for example, faster provers or faster throughput solutions or more optimized nodes. There's always going to be these things that comes up, and that can be, and there will be really strong teams that focuses on the execution of each of these verticals. But the time to build a holistic and well-rounded L2 team has passed. A well-rounded team, it means like having a zk function, an infra function, a protocol function, and having the expertise around 360 degrees to know what is relevant and make the right choices. I think that kind of insight and knowledge is what will enable a chain to make the right decisions going forward. We have about maybe 3 to 5 years where there will be constantly different competitors and different niche improvements and different incremental improvements.
The performance being like the TPS game we played 5 years ago.
Correct. Yeah. So there's going to be a variety of that coming up in the next 3 to 5 years, like parallelization or something But fundamentally, as long as everything's open source and you can plug into the existing stack, I think the main difference is just how well you make these decisions and how well the core team can absorb these new innovation.
So maybe kind of if you continue that line of thinking, what do you think 5 years from now or even 3 years from now the world looks like? Because you're effectively saying everything becomes table stakes because now everybody can copy every performance enhancements into their setup. Does that mean best branding wins? Does that mean there's going to be some moat and defensibility on what's getting more traction, continues to get traction? Or are you worried about now other competitors for Scroll?
I think for the next period of this so-called kind of infra arm race, the thing that most people don't like to talk about, it's a bit iffy, or not iffy, but a bit airy-fairy, is branding. Branding is the only sustainable moat that I can see. When you look at all the major DeFi protocols, which is the big battle of the last cycle, I would say Aave and Uniswap, they exist just as brands. There are so many different iterations and slight improvements on them, but no one can beat the brand moat. And so whichever L2 can create a authentic and sustainable and memorable brand, I think will do really well. And right now, honestly, I don't think any L2 is even close to getting there yet. Are
there ways you can get there? We were talking about celebrity endorsements and and a lot of ads on F1 cars. Is this how we get to better branding, or just the better products on the chain is kind of what gets you there?
I think one analogy I've been trying to use increasingly to speak to audience outside of the nerdy techie core is that chain is going to be more and more commoditized. There are some product decisions that needs to be made right in order for a chain to stay at the forefront. But essentially, it's going to become like trainers. But whether you buy Nike versus Adidas versus something else, it's about what you really resonate with as a person or as a developer. And that brand needs to be authentic. It needs to come down to storytelling. And in terms of how you, once you found that story, how you amplify it, there could be various methodologies ETHGlobal, for example.
Thank you. That's the perfect time to conclude here. I'll take the compliment. But that was an amazing conversation, and I am looking forward to the next few years of Scroll being the dominant brand in L2s.
Thank you.
Please give Sandy a big round of applause.